I always hated Mondays. This one would turn out to be one of my worst. My wife, Peggy, was very despondent and moody. She fixed breakfast for the boys and me, as if she were a robot. She wasn't being nasty, just depressed. It didn't help to brighten the morning. I had no idea what brought it on, and didn't feel inclined to ask her. My sons, Robert, 16, and Dave, 18, left for school about the same time I left for work. For the last 15 years, I worked for a freight company that loaded and unloaded container ships. It was hard work but paid good money. I had always wanted to go to sea, and this was as close as I could get. My dream was to sail all over the world and see different lands and people. It was in my blood, and sometimes I would get depressed just knowing that it would never happen. Home and family seemed to take precedence. I was happy with my home life. I had 2 great sons and a loving wife whom I adored. Unfortunately, it was Monday. The part I hated most about my work was some of the people I worked with. Colin Farrell was the most obnoxious guy in the world, and he had 3 buddies always hanging around: Bob Timbers, Ray Collins, and Freddie Springer. The 5 of us went to high school together. I didn't like them then, and I didn't like them now. "Hey Grady, missed you at the party Saturday night." It seemed like Colin was going to start something early today. There was a company party Saturday night, but the boys and I had to go to Chester to help my father move out of his house. My mother died 6 months ago, and Dad decided to move into something smaller. Peggy was disappointed, so I told her to go to the party without us. When we got back Sunday night, I asked her how the party was, and she just said, "Okay." I just glared at Colin and didn't say anything. "We're sorry you couldn't make it, Grady, but thanks for letting your wife come. She made the whole evening worthwhile." I found myself clenching my fists as I listened to his group of hyenas giggling like girls. They seemed to be having a private joke at my expense. As I started to walk away, Colin followed and continued his taunting. "She sure has developed into a fine piece since high school, Grady. You are one lucky guy to have that to come home to every night." I could see that it was going to be a long day. The veins in my forehead started popping, and I could feel the tendons in my neck tightening. All my life, I had to fight to control my temper. Again, I tried to walk away. I turned to face the group, and Colin flipped something towards me. It was red, it was soft, and it was a pair of panties. Peggy forgot these Saturday. She might need them to go with that red bra she was wearing. The entire group broke out laughing. I stood looking at them without raising my head. The red silk fell onto the concrete loading platform at my feet. I made no effort to pick it up. I suddenly realized that I had stopped breathing and felt my stomach muscles tensing. I was becoming a coiled spring of fury, ready to unwind. I could take any one of them with no problem, but all of them at once might be difficult. At this point, I didn't care. I started to move toward my tormentors when a huge hand grabbed my shoulder. Josh Hamilton, the dock foreman, looked me in the eye and simply nodded his head toward the main office. Nothing was said. I glared at the group with a hatred they had never seen before and followed Josh up the stairs. For some reason, all of them stopped laughing and got worried looks on their faces. Josh went into Henry Clark's office, and I sat down across from Henry's secretary, Sally. "Grady, would you like a cup of coffee?" "No thanks, I'm too upset to hold a cup right now." I could see Josh and Henry talking through the glass partition. It seemed serious. "Sally, were you at the party Saturday night?" She simply nodded yes. "Can you tell me what the hell happened? I have no idea what is going on." Peggy didn't say anything, and I don't know what to do. "I shouldn't say anything, Grady. That is something you should take up with your wife." "You were there, Sally. You saw what happened. Just give me a clue." Sally was fumbling around with some papers on her desk, trying to figure out how she could get out of talking to me. "Please, Sally, I need to know." Peggy showed up at the party dressed to kill. After about an hour, Colin started to pump drinks into her. She seemed to be having a good time. Colin would whisper things to his posse every time he got the drinks refilled, and they would all laugh. Finally, Peggy and Colin went back to the storeroom. About 30 minutes later, Bob, Ray, and Freddie went back. We didn't see any of them for an hour, and then they all showed up again, laughing and joking. Peggy was smiling but looked like hell. Her hair and her dress were messed up. She and Colin left together about 10 minutes later. "Thanks, Sally. I didn't want to hear that, but it explains things." We sat silent for about 10 more minutes. Josh came out and nodded for me to go in. "Grady, I'm not happy about what went on this morning. Colin, Ray, Bob, and Freddie each got a week off with no pay. I want you to take 2 weeks vacation." Josh told me what happened Saturday, and I assume this is the first you heard of it. I can't afford to have anybody in the hospital. I don't believe any of this is your fault, but I expect you to have things straightened out before you come back. I'll do whatever I can to help you through this. Just ask. Now get out of here. I nodded thank you to Henry and thanked Sally again as I left the office. Colin and his boys were nowhere around as I went to the parking area. I left the panties on the dock. I didn't go home. I started driving north, looking for a sanctuary where I could lose myself. I had a long time to think about the past and the present. Peggy and I went to high school together. She was big, fat, sloppy, and not what you would call attractive. She didn't know how to groom herself or put on makeup. Her hair always looked like crap. She was not in any groups and was basically a social outcast. Of course, that is what attracted me to her. I was 6'3", and weighed close to 300 oz. I was large but also clumsy, shy, and nothing to look at. I was too awkward to play any sports. Colin Farrell was just the opposite. He was good-looking, smooth-talking, and athletic. I know it sounds stupid, but the rumor was that the girls would try to get Colin to take them out so that he could pop their cherries. He never had a steady girlfriend, but never went without a date. I hated the guy. He would brag about his conquests, and the girls didn't seem to mind, all except Peggy. Peggy had tried to get Colin to take her out. She wanted to be able to say he was her first. Colin not only turned her down, but he told the whole school about it. He said he only dated pretty girls and wasn't about to stoop low enough to screw a pig. The kids in school thought it was a hoot, but Peggy was crushed. I viewed this as my chance to move in. Since I had no idea how to court a girl, I just started being friendly. Pretty soon, we became close, and by the time we finished school, we were a couple. I was the one that got to pop her. I got a job out of school as a construction laborer. In a year's time, my flat was gone, and I was all muscle and sinew. I was strong and coordinated. It felt good to no longer be a walking joke. Peggy and I were married within a year. Robert and Dave were born very close together, and Peggy started working out at a neighborhood gym shortly after. The transformation was amazing. Somewhere along the way, she learned how to fix her hair, put on just the right amount of makeup, and dress to kill. She looked good, and I was proud to have her for my wife. I loved her when she was a frog, and my reward was a princess. When I got the job at the loading dock, our whole life took a change for the better until today. The A14 turned into the A1 as I continued to knock down the miles. I knew where I was going, and it was just a matter of time. I thought about my 2 sons. They came from large, powerful stock, and showed it. We made sure that both of them were active so that they wouldn't turn into the lumps we did. Dave was about 2 inches taller than Robert, and a little leaner. Robert had large hands and large arms. Both of them were fit and able to take care of themselves. We taught them restraint and the importance of not being a bully. They both had the same goal to go to sea. I guess it was in the blood. I promised I would help them in whatever they wanted to do. Peggy was a good mother and a great wife. She kept a good house and did not waste money on frivolous things. We had a great sex life, or so I thought. We had fun when we had sex, and I was perfectly content with that part of our life. I found myself on the M6, still clicking off the miles. The shadows were getting long, and I was hoping to arrive before dark. It was a 7-hour trip to Port Patrick, but it was the only place I wanted to be right now. I kept looking for the A75, and finally found it as the sun went down. There were plenty of parking spaces this time of year by the Duke's Duck. I gave my keys to the barkeep and asked for a room by the week. I had no luggage, change of clothes, or razor, but didn't care. He took the room key off the hook, gave it to me, and hung my car keys in the same spot. I took a pint and sat down in the back corner. The street light was shining through the amber bottled glass window by my head. It was time to get numb and forget the world. I would find myself waking up in my room late in the mornings. I vaguely remembered how I got there. Usually, one of the local regulars would help me up the stairs and drop me on top of the bed. I never did get under the sheets. I splashed some water on my face and a couple of times took a shower. I had to put the same clothes back on, so the shower didn't really help much odor-wise. I was getting a fierce-looking beard. I had never let my facial hair grow, and it was a little unnerving to see it in the condition I was in. Every couple of days, they ran my credit card through it to keep the tab up to date. I had been wallowing in self-pity for a long while, and I was starting to get sick of it. I was sitting, glassy-eyed, staring at the dartboard for the 1,000th time when 2 uniforms walked in. I watched them without looking at them. They talked to the barkeep a while, and he nodded in my direction. He also pointed to my keys on the wall behind him. I assumed they were looking for me. I was amazed at my own intelligence. They didn't even try to talk to me. They just pumped coffee into me for the next 2 hours. Grady Baxter, do you think you can talk to us? Did I do something wrong? We just need to talk. Are you up to it? Can we go outside? The sun was shining, but everything was wet. The cobbles on the street in front of the pub were slick, and I took my time walking across to the seawall. The whole street was on a slope, and I still felt a little tipsy. The cool air was marvelous as it filled my lungs. I don't smoke, but the air inside was so thick the results were the same. I leaned over the granite seawall and threw up. It was mostly liquid because I hadn't eaten much solid food the last few days. My head started to clear, and so did my eyes. My 2 companions waited patiently while I got myself together. I was starting to feel obligated for putting them to so much trouble. The bench I sat on was wet, but I didn't care. What can I help you with, gentlemen? First of all, we were trying to find you since you were missing for 10 days. Second, we are trying to locate Colin Farrell, and we're hoping you could help us. Well, you found me, so that part is solved. I haven't seen Colin Farrell since the day I arrived here. I believe the barkeep has already informed you that I have not left the inn since I checked in. I have no idea where Colin is, but I think I will be looking for him when I get home. I chatted with them for about another hour. They had nothing to charge me with, and after they found me safe, they seemed to only be interested in talking about Colin. They located me through the credit card charges. I'll remember not to make that mistake again if it ever comes up. I went down the hill and bought some fresh clothes and a toothbrush. I decided I would keep the beard a while, even though it looked like crap. After a final shower, I paid my bill and started home. I stopped about 4 times on the way. Twice I got something to eat, but mostly I was just trying to delay my arrival. There was nothing pleasant or enjoyable waiting for me at home. I did want to see my boys, though. She was sitting on the couch. There was only one light on in the living room. She watched me with her hands on her lap, afraid to move. It looked as if she had been crying, but it was hard to be sure in the dim light. I went to get a beer, but the thought of it made me a little nauseous, so I grabbed a Coke instead. I sat in the recliner across from her and waited for her to say something. The boys are staying with friends for the night. It was my idea so that we would have some private time to talk. Why didn't you tell me about it before I found out? I don't know. I was scared, I guess. About what? I wasn't sure what you would think or do. I did something stupid, and it backfired on me. Backfired? What the hell backfired? You won't get mad at me, will you, Grady? I don't know. It would probably be better if you told the truth, but we'll have to wait and see. Grady, do you remember what Colin did to me in high school? Yes. I have been wanting to get even with him for that ever since it happened. Saturday night at the party, it seemed like a good time, so I set a trap for him. Doesn't sound like the story I heard. Listen to me, Grady. Like I said, it backfired on me. I dressed up real good, and Colin started to hit on me. I let him think it was working, and he suggested we go back to the storeroom. We kissed a little because I had to do it to set him up. After a while, he was playing with my tits but outside my bra. I slicked my panties off and waved them under his nose to tempt him and make sure he was hard. Why were you doing this? What were you thinking? I wanted to get even with him. I wanted to make him pay for humiliating me. Anyway, I noticed the bulge in his pants, so I told him to take them off so we could enjoy ourselves. He dropped his pants and underwear, and then I did the thing that girls are never supposed to do. Okay, what the hell did you do? I pointed at his hard pecker and started to laugh. I told him that it was a pathetic excuse for manhood and that there was no way I was going to let anybody with a tiny thing like that be with me. As I teased him about his manhood, it started to shrink until there was nothing left but a limp thingy. That was a rotten thing to do, but appropriate in this case. Go on. I got myself together and opened the door to leave. Bob, Ray, and Freddie were waiting outside the door. Evidently, Colin had told them they could have seconds after he finished with me, and they were patiently waiting their turns. I walked past them and went to the ladies' room, laughing. When I came back to the party, they were all standing around with big smiles on their faces. Apparently, they had told all the other guys at the party they had screwed me in the storeroom. They said that to get even with me for humiliating Colin. I was upset and left. I heard that you left with Colin. That's not true. I left by myself and drove straight home. You left your panties there for Colin. No, I just forgot them when I left. Why didn't you tell me? After they twisted everything around, I got scared. I didn't know what to say to you. So you let me find out for myself in front of all my workmates. I felt like a fool, like a cuckold. They were teasing me about what went on, and I couldn't even reply because I didn't know anything. I had to find out from a secretary what happened, and her story doesn't exactly match yours. She wasn't there. I was. What I told you is what happened. Damn it, Grady. I am your wife. You were supposed to stick up for me and support me. Peggy started to cry and walked into the kitchen. I sat there with my Coke and watched as she leaned on the formica table and softly cried. I loved her more than anything. She was the only girl I ever cared about. She was feeding me and putting on the waterworks. Peggy had an agenda to preserve her marriage. Sally had no reason in the world to lie to me. I felt an urge to start questioning Peggy on each and every inconsistency in her story, but decided not to. I couldn't change what happened, and by forcing Peggy to admit to something that she didn't want to, it wouldn't accomplish anything. I did want to know the truth, but I wasn't going to get it from her. I figured I would leave things as they were and let her relax. I took another shower and got into bed with my wife. She laid her head on my shoulder and whispered that she loved me. We both fell asleep. I still had some days coming before it was time to go back to work. The boys were glad to see me but were a little standoffish. I suggested a drive to London, which was quickly accepted. Peggy seemed to be happy that the men in her family were bonding. On the drive to London, I found out the boys were both suspended for fighting, a strict no-no in our family. Reluctantly, they explained they were getting a lot of flack about their mother's party escapade and finally decided to put an end to it. Several boys with smart mouths ended up with loose teeth and black eyes. They kept the suspension from their mother, but asked me for an explanation about the party. I put it off. We went to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. I asked for 3 applications, and the boys were ecstatic. It took an hour to fill out all the forms. I had all the documents we needed, including birth records and passports. After each of us had a short interview, they gave us medical forms to be filled out by a physician. We went to Wagamama for supper and started home. It was agreed that nothing would be said to their mother or to their friends. The physicals were completed the next day, and all we had to do now was wait. I always loved Peggy. She was the only girl I ever loved. She was the only girl I ever had sex with. In fact, she was the only girl I ever kissed. It was difficult for me to believe that she had done something this low. I found her actions despicable and unforgivable. I was still willing to give her a chance if by some reason her story could be proven, but the odds were long. At the end of that week, she put the final nail in her coffin. Peggy had been very attentive. She was careful never to mention anything about the party or any references to anything relating to the party. She never discussed my trip to Port Patrick. She was trying everything in her power to resume our life just how it had been. The next day at breakfast, I was hit with the ultimate in stupidity. "Grady, I was thinking I would like to have another baby." Now I knew what the love session the night before was all about. We need a little background here to be able to appreciate the stupidity of this comment. Peggy had been on birth control pills for several years after the boys were born. About 3 years ago, she started complaining about the side effects of the pills. I won't go into the specifics, but she was having different types of female problems that were supposed to be either caused or aggravated by the pills. In any event, she decided to stop taking them. We were not using any other type of birth control. A short time later, I was in the doctor's office for a rotor cuff problem. I asked him about getting clipped, and 20 minutes later, I was sterile. I never mentioned this to Peggy. I didn't see any need to. For the last 3 years, Peggy and I have been having unprotected sex. No pills, no condom, no diaphragm. At no time did Peggy ever mention or wonder why she wasn't getting pregnant. Now all of a sudden she wants to wave a magic wand and have a baby. Either she is extremely stupid, or she thinks I am extremely stupid. I looked at her in amazement. "I think that would be great, honey." Now, being a man, I don't know much about pregnancy, but since it had been almost 3 weeks since the party, there is a good chance that Peggy had missed a period and was covering her ass. This put a whole new light on things, so I decided to move up my schedule. The boys were back in school, and I got a chance to talk to them a little bit before they left. They seemed to understand my situation concerning their mother better than I did. I felt better knowing that I had their support and backing no matter what happened. I was not sure what was going to occur at this point. I spent most of the day looking for Colin Farrell. He had to be someplace. At lunchtime, I went by the docks and spoke to Sally. Bob, Ray, and Freddie were back at work, but she had no idea what was going on with Colin. The rumor was that he was afraid I would go after him. That didn't make sense because I was a peaceable fellow. I avoided the work area so I wouldn't run into any of my 3 tormentors. That afternoon, I stopped by to see a local lawyer and started the paperwork needed to divorce Peggy. I didn't want to hurt her, but I didn't want to live with her anymore. The boys would be on their own shortly, and I didn't see any reason for me to stick around. The one remaining problem that I couldn't shake was the need to thank Colin and his boys for ruining my marriage. I know that the fault was primarily Peggy's, but I couldn't punish her. Her paramours would have to pay for their poor judgment. Freddie Springer was married, but always stopped by McMurray's for a pint before heading home. It was just getting dark when he came out the side door and started walking along the building to his car in the rear. I surprised the heck out of him when I grabbed his left arm and twisted it up behind his back. I ran him full speed into the wall and heard a few things break as his face met the brick. His knees buckled a little, but I held him by his arm as I started to pound his kidneys with my right fist. As he sank lower, my fist started to hit higher, and I could hear ribs cracking. I must have hit him 20 times when his arm went loose at the shoulder socket. I dropped him to the cobblestones as a group of people came down the alley. No one chased me as I calmly walked to my car and drove away. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the police station. Peggy had just put the house up for collateral to get bail and was finishing the paperwork. Alice Springer came storming in, screaming that she wanted me put away forever. They were able to keep her away from me, but she didn't shut up till Peggy talked to her. I don't know what Peggy said, but Alice looked at both of us like we were dirt and walked out. Robert and Dave had my car and drove me home while Peggy followed. The boys seemed to be proud of me, but I was careful not to say or do anything to encourage them. Freddie had a dislocated shoulder, a broken nose, 2 black eyes, and lots of internal injuries that they had not fully identified yet. 4 ribs were broken, but luckily none had punctured his lungs. My wife and I didn't speak of the problem when we got home. I slept on the couch for the first time in 20 years but didn't mind. I was up and out early the next morning trying to figure out what to do next. The Osaka Maru was unloading at Felix. The captain, Jos Costa, was an agreeable man and was willing to take me on when and if I got my papers. I promised to get back to him later in the week. On the way home, I stopped to top off the gas tank. Just as I finished up, I noticed someone rushing toward me. I turned just as Ray Collins hit me on the left side with a piece of 2x4. The wood glanced off my left arm before cracking a couple of ribs. I squinted my eyes and bent over from the pain. I remember trying to breathe and not being able to inhale. With my eyes closed, I saw bright white flashes and then felt my knees buckle. The wooden club made a funny clunking noise as it bounced around on the asphalt. Ray wasn't able to hold on to it after the impact. My right hand darted out as I was falling and grabbed some flannel. I was able to twist around to the left as I rammed my right fist with flannel into the ground. I felt myself land on Ray's body hard. My eyes were still clenched shut, trying to block out the pain in my left side. I could not move my left arm. I was acting on instinct as my right hand started to hammer up and down. I didn't know what I was hitting, but as long as it was an assault, that was good. Both sides of my body were working independently of each other. As my left side was crunching up for protection, my right side was attacking anything it could find. At first, Ray was squirming under me, trying to get free, but after a few seconds, he was still. I didn't stop hitting him until some customers pulled me off. I still couldn't get a good breath of air, and it hurt like heck. One of the medics gave me a shot, and I slept all the way to the hospital. I woke up a few hours later with a sling on my left arm and my body taped tight. I was able to breathe, but with care. Peggy was there and did not look pleased. "Damn it, Grady, what do you think you were doing? You were making a hell of a fuss over that little party problem." "Sorry, honey. I didn't do anything. Why did your boyfriend attack me with a 2x4? And what do you mean by a little party problem? Either I get a better explanation about what went on that Saturday, or I will continue talking to people." "You were not talking. You were hunting them down and thumping them." I gave her a big smile. Why would I want to do something like that? "Stop acting like a bully and stop referring to them as my boyfriends." Peggy walked out the door just as the doctor came in. I was more bruised than broken. Ray swung that wood like a little boy. My arm was just sore, and the cracks in my ribs were superficial. The pain and problem I had breathing were just from the impact. Early the next morning, Robert and Dave came and picked me up. They were grinning from ear to ear, and I told them to can it. Ray, on the other hand, was in bad shape. He would be eating through a straw for about a month until his jaw healed, and it would be at least a week until the swelling went down on his face. One errant blow did happen to break his left collarbone. Of course, all the blows were errant, because I had no idea what I was hitting at the time. There were no charges against me because several people testified that Ray attacked me first. I had to call into work and get another week off, this time as sick leave. I talked to Sally for a while, and she told me that Bob Timbers had quit work and his final paycheck was being sent to his brother's house in Aberdeen. They still had no idea where Colin was. Peggy and I were not communicating very well. I was sleeping on the couch every night now. I was able to shed the arm sling pretty quickly, but my ribs were still a little sore. At least I could move and breathe normally. The Osaka Maru was leaving in 4 days. I stopped by to see my lawyer. The divorce papers were ready, so I told him to have them served in 4 days. I was leaving everything with Peggy. She would get the house, but the bonding company would take it when I skipped bail. I could care less. I included a copy of the vasectomy paperwork and a recent sperm count lab report with the divorce papers. I made a few phone calls to some friends in Scotland and spent some time at the gym trying to recover from the 2x4 attack. Henry Clark was not happy to see me leave and agreed to keep my departure quiet as long as he could. I asked him to look out for my boys if necessary. Peggy had stopped going to the gym, and the house was going to pot. The wash was backing up, and the general appearance of the whole place was going downhill. The meals were just thrown together, and the conversation was less than sparkling. I swear it looked like she was putting on weight again. The whole world went on as usual in 4 weeks. The next day, the boys handed me my set of maritime papers. I had never seen them so happy. All 3 of us were ready to go. I told them to wait and finish this year of school before making any decisions. I don't think they were listening to me. I returned to the Osaka Maru and took care of everything I had to. The quartermaster gave me a list of things I had to get prior to sailing. The next morning, I got my gear and checked into my room on board, and then left the ship one last time. Robert had left his Triumph Bonneville 750 parked at the end of the dock. A few minutes later, I was on my way to Aberdeen. An 8-hour trip on a motorcycle is not a pleasure. The Triumph was shaking so hard that you could not read the odometer. The motor ran smoothly, and the weather held, but I was still glad when I arrived. My friends had located Bob Timbers and planned to have him at the 4 Crowns. The men's room at that place was in the back, and you had to exit the building to get to it. I stopped in and looked around just enough to let my buddies know I had arrived. Then I went to the side of the building and waited. The first 2 guys were lowlifes, but then Bob came out. I heard the door lock behind him as he started toward the toilet. I grabbed his right arm like I did Freddy's and shoved his head against the stone wall of the building. As I went down the alleyway, his whole face was scraping along the stone as I walked, and he stumbled. I went about 50 feet and dropped him against the wall. He was half moaning and half crying in pain. By the dim glow from the streetlight, I could see his right eye socket was solid blood. His cheekbone was showing below his eye, and the entire side of his face was one big abrasion. "Don't kill me, Grady. Please don't kill me. I'm sorry. I had no intention of killing him, but I figured there was no point in telling him that. "I'll give you a choice, Bob. Tell me the truth about everything that happened at the party, and I'll let you live. Lie to me, and you die." Okay, I'm hurting, Grady. Talk, damn it, and I'll get you a doctor." When Peggy came into the party without you, Colin got all excited. He started bragging about how he was going to get her loaded and shag her. She did look good, Grady, honest. She was all dressed up and looked like she wanted to have fun. Colin started loading her up with drinks, and he told us that we could have sloppy seconds. We didn't think he could pull it off. After a bit, he took her back to the storeroom, and we followed him. "Are you sure you want to hear this, Grady?" "Yes, keep going." "Okay, but don't hurt me anymore." We could hear Colin and Peggy behind the door going at it. She was moaning and saying dirty stuff like the girls in the porno movies. We got hot as heck just listening. After a while, Colin opened the door. Peggy was on the couch with one knee in the air and her bush exposed. Her top was down to her waist. Her chest was out, and she had a big smile on her face. We each took turns with her, and she started blowing us while she was being screwed. We never hurt her. We never forced her to do anything she didn't want to do. Colin and Freddie had her in the rear, but Ray and I weren't into that. When we got done, we helped her get dressed. She and Colin left together, and I think they stopped someplace before he dropped her off. But I don't know for sure. That's it, Grady. I'm sorry. We didn't hurt her, honest, and we didn't make her do anything she didn't want to do. I just looked at him. Do you know where Colin Farrell is? He just shook his head no. This man was in no position to lie to me. His story was a lot closer to the one Sally told me than to the one Peggy told me. His face looked gross in the yellow light. He was bleeding more, and his jacket was turning a dull black color. Flakes of skin were hanging from his cheek, and the raw meat under it was bright red. I knocked on the locked pub door, shook hands with a couple of old friends, and got on the bike. A few miles down the road, I passed the medical emergency vehicle going to the pub. It was early morning when I parked the Triumph at the spot. I picked it up and boarded the Osaka Maru. Robert would pick up the bike later. My first duty schedule was that night, so I spent the rest of the day resting from my trip. That damn motorcycle beat the heck out of me. I should have taken the car. I woke up several hours later, showered, and got some supper. My supervisor gave me a job description, explained my duties, and left me by myself. It was an entry-level job, and was not that difficult or mind-boggling. My crewmates were less than friendly and not very helpful. They would answer any direct questions I had but offer no help or advice, and none of them seemed interested in establishing any kind of association. I was looking forward to some sort of connection with the rest of the crew, but it looks like it will not be easy. They all seemed to be friendly with each other, but I was not included in the circle. I decided to wait it out. Peggy was now aware that I was gone. She should have been served her divorce papers that morning. I am sure that Bob Timbers had given his whole story to the officials by now. I could see my two demon sons snickering to each other over the current events. My shift ended, and I went to bed. 2 days later, I was summoned to the captain's office in the middle of the day. Captain Costa did not look happy as I stood in front of him. Mr. Baxter, the Royal Navy has requested permission to land a helicopter on the Osaka Maru in order to transport you back to the mainland. I received an extensive wire this morning justifying their request. I will summarize some of the items on the extradition request. If there are any errors, you can explain them. I simply nodded in agreement. They wish to talk to you about the disappearance of a fellow named Colin Farrell. You have charges against you for the beating of a man named Fred Sprinter so badly that he lost one kidney and might lose the other. You forfeited bail on that charge. You have charges against you for the maiming of a fellow named Ray Collins. That was listed as self-defense, but is being changed because of the severity. Finally, on the night you boarded the ship, you beat a man named Bob Timber in Aberdeen so badly that he lost his right eye. I don't know how the heck you could be here in Aberdeen at the same time, and I don't want to know. It says here that all this mayhem was done with your bare hands to avenge a personal affront. Do you have any comments, Mr. Baxter? Sir, I am sorry for any problems I might have caused you. I mean about the charges, just that if I could have found Colin Farrell, he would be in the hospital with the other 3. I really don't know where that son of a gun is. I'll pack my things and get ready for the helicopter when it arrives. Captain Costa just looked at me and smiled. That won't be necessary. I told them you never got aboard. There is no Grady Baxter on the Osaka Maru. Now get back to work. I went back to the crew quarters, took a shower, and got ready for my shift. By the time I finished the evening meal, the police report had circulated through the entire crew. For the rest of the tour, I had more friends than I could handle. I had no contact with anyone from home until we were about a month out. I got a wire from my lawyer. The divorce had already been finalized, so I was now a free man. Peggy lost the house to the bail bond company when I left the country. Colin Farrell was in the hospital with extensive internal injuries and 2 broken kneecaps. The police were looking for Robert and Dave in connection with the beating. My sons found Colin with Peggy in our bedroom before the house was taken back. Peggy was now living in a hostel with her sister. She was pregnant, and her old weight problem was creeping back. I still had charges pending, and my attorney recommended that I do not return. He had no idea where my sons were. The news left me with mixed emotions. The next day at breakfast, the captain walked past the table and stopped. "I just wanted to let you know that Robert and Dave Baxter are not aboard the Tan Nakamura headed for Cape Town." We both smiled. I always wanted to be a seafaring man. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.